who was one of the finalists in American Idol.
Wow.
Jazz. He does scat.
Yeah.
He plays a bunch of instruments. He plays the bass.
Mm.
Totally out of here. Okay. Keep an eye and make sure I don't step in your frame there.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Giles, Kenneth. How do you
Right.
prefer to be called?
You can call me Ken or
Ken? Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
it's fine.
So we are rolling.
It is Giles with
Giles?
a soft G like J.
So for your credit, how would you like that to read?
It could read Ken Giles.
You like Ken Giles, and
Yeah.
in terms of what do we say about you? Music educator? Or how would
Yeah.
you like to be called?
I'm a retired federal employee, and now I'm a music teacher.
Okay. Which do you prefer to? We probably only have room for one.
Okay. Well, you know
You
what?
can think about that.
Yeah.
You don't have to give us an answer right away.
Okay, fine.
So, first question is, in a sentence or less, if you were to sum up the experience for you personally of being a page when you were a page, and this question you don't have to tell us you don't have to phrase the question in the answer. Tell us, for you personally, what it meant to be a page, or describe it in a way that is personal to you in a phrase or a sentence.
Being a page showed me how important government is, especially good government that tries to make our society better. I saw civil rights legislation get passed. I saw healthcare legislation, Medicare, get passed. And it just showed me that our government can do good things to improve our society, and that big majorities in Congress can make that happen.
Great, excellent, great answer. Okay, great. Now, when you were, tell us a little bit about how you were selected to be a page and how that worked, and how did you find out about it? What were you expecting at the time? How old were you?
I was born and raised in Illinois, and from my earliest consciousness, I knew there were pages. I think I had seen or read articles about other pages from Illinois or around the country. And so as early as about 9 or 10 years old, I started writing letters to the senators from Illinois and also the representative from my district, just saying I was interested in being a page. And this went on for a few years, and finally when I was 14 years old, a freshman in high school, Senator Dirksen answered and said he was considering appointing me to the Capitol Page School. And he did that in 1965, and I spent several months at the Capitol Page School in 1965.
Wow. And tell us, if you could, and use his full name, tell us who Senator Dirksen was, Everett Dirksen. Just tell us a little bit about him, if you could.
Senator Everett Dirksen was a Republican from Illinois. He was the minority leader in the U.S. Senate. He'd had a long career in government. He was very well respected, and he was a good compromiser in the best sense of the word. He could really be bipartisan. And in fact, the civil rights legislation of the mid-1960s really was the result of the compromise and the support between President Johnson and Senator Dirksen and their respective parties.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of disappeared these days, hasn't it?
Well, it's a model. The bipartisanship of the mid-60s, I think, is a good example of what makes government work.
Yeah, I've read recently there's been a lot of discussion and writing about how that whole thing has changed. That at one time that was the norm, is that that the two parties might differ for various reasons, but they always came together and made things happen. So that must have been really outstanding, being part of that, being able to witness that.
What I saw was the passage of major healthcare legislation like Medicare and major civil rights legislation like the Voting Rights Act. And in all those cases, there were huge majorities, 70, 80 senators voting in favor of these laws. And that meant you had bipartisanship. And Dirksen helped round up some of the Republican votes. Senator Mansfield was the majority leader. Lyndon Johnson was president. And I think it moved our country forward and helped create the social programs that we still need and use today.
So as a 14-year-old coming to Washington, was it the first time you were here? And if so, go back there for us for a minute and tell us what it was like stepping off out of the cab or wherever on Capitol Hill for the first time as a kid and taking all this in?
My family and I had visited Washington 6 or 8 months before I actually came as a page. So I knew what the city looked like, and we had visited Senator Dirkson's office, and I was ready to essentially go to work as a page and also go to school at the Capitol Page School. In January 19...
Let's pause just 1 minute. I got a really bad something going on out here. Let's just pause 1 second.
Okay.
Is that a bus?
You know what it is the trash truck.
Oh, okay. He'll be gone in a second.
Friday morning trash.
Yeah. Get that trash. This might get a little bit closer. If I could just get a little bit more of a level from you, just.
Uh-huh. All right, so the trash truck has stopped.
Okay, good. We're good. Oh no, he's still going. I want to pause for just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, 'cause that was. We'll go back.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
All right, we'll
Great
say that
stuff.
again.
Okay, that's all right. Okay, we are speeding. Sorry.
All right. When I came to Washington in January 1965, I got a room at a rooming house on C Street Southeast. I went to the Capitol Page School for morning classes, and I went across the street to the Capitol building for the work in the Senate. I was sworn in as a page on the same day that several new senators were sworn in, and one of those new senators was Robert Kennedy, the new senator from New York, and it was impressive to see him live. And in January of '65, Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson, was sworn in for his full 4-year term, and he immediately launched an ambitious set of legislative initiatives, including Medicare and Medicaid, and the voting rights law, and several other articles of legislation that quickly came to the U.S. Senate.
Boy, you're good. You remember everything. I mean, you just, when you back up, you go right through it again. That's great. Talk a little bit about, were there any concerns about, from your family about coming to Washington at such an early age and, in some ways being on your own? I mean, was that encouraged? Was there concerns?
I don't remember my family being concerned for safety. I think they were confident that I was mature and that I could handle myself well living in a rooming house. They came to the rooming house that we selected, and I think it was generally felt that I could do this. I could get up in the morning and get to the school on time. We had to be there very early, a little before 6:30. And then we went across the street by about 10 or 10:30 to go to work. We worked most of the day until, say, 5 o'clock. And sometimes we worked late if the Senate was still in session or there was a joint session of Congress. And then back to the rooming house, try to do some homework, and get up the next day and go back to school. So in general, I think my family was supportive of this. They knew, of course, that I had been interested in it for years. And so here, when I actually came to Washington, I was 15, and it was a sort of an ambition, an early childhood ambition coming to pass.
By the way, you had mentioned that now that you're a teacher, that your mission now is to pass what you know on to younger people. Was by any chance was any of that was that seed planted at this time? And if so, just tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us that you're a teacher now.
I am a music teacher now in the DC public schools, and it's a wonderful opportunity for me to pass on to younger people the music and the history that I experienced through my growing up years, which included the year here in Washington. Of course, I heard some wonderful music, rhythm and blues, Motown, rock and roll, and the civil rights songs and all the topical songs that came out of that era. And I teach my students about the music and the links to history, like the civil rights movement and the peace movement and the labor union movement. And I find that I do reach back to my experience as a page and talk about it in my music classes now as a teacher.
That's great. What a great, having somebody that was there who was a witness to this sort of thing. Speaking of that, Do you have specific memories of, or is there a particularly vivid memory of a moment that you observed, a moment in history that you observed, and tell us about it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are several moments that I remember explicitly. One is the joint session of Congress to promote the Voting Rights Act. President Johnson was very decisive. He had decided to endorse the Voting Rights Act, and at a joint session of Congress, House and Senate members together, and I was standing in the House chamber, President Johnson said something like, "There's a lot of prejudice in our country that we have to overcome, and we shall overcome." And he literally used the words of the anthem of the civil rights movement to endorse the voting rights law. And it transformed our country and the prospects for the law. A few weeks later, the voting rights law passed the U.S. Senate. I took out a blank vote sheet that day because I knew this was historic, and I actually marked off the senators who voted for and against. And I have that vote sheet to this day. I show it to my students at school, and it shows a big majority, 77 senators in favor of the voting rights law. In addition, I remember the passage of Medicare and Medicaid, which of course is the basis of our healthcare system today. I also have a memory of the beginning of the bombing of North Vietnam. I'm not sure any of us realized how momentous that was, but it did happen in the beginning of 1965, and ironically led to some of the problems that stalled the progress of our civil rights legislation and other social legislation.
Yeah, that must have been a pretty tumultuous time in terms of the war.
The civil rights movement was the main social movement that I remember from 1965. I even went to the White House and watched some of the demonstrators walk back and forth in front of the White House, and I realized this is important in our history, and I'm able to see some of that history being made. So when the voting rights law was passed, I wanted to document that, and that's why I wrote out the vote sheet.
Any other personal impressions you have of people, of any specific public figure, Johnson, Dirksen, Hubert Humphrey, if he was?
Well, Senator Dirksen was my sponsor, and he used to call me into his office when the grades came out from the Capitol Page School, and he would say, "I see your grades here from school," which fortunately were pretty good. He was a kind of grandfatherly person to me. I didn't know him very well, but my interactions were always very pleasant and positive. I remember Margaret Chase Smith. She was a Republican senator, a very stately, formal person, but also very pleasant to the Pages. The Pages always sort of recognized and appreciated members of Congress who were friendly to them. And Senator Chase Smith was friendly to the Pages. I do remember Senator Javits, Jacob Javits from New York. He could be brusque, but he was very smart and very, very committed. He was one of those Republicans who would sometimes collaborate with Democrats to try to get legislation passed. I remember Senator Mansfield. He was the majority leader, very dignified leader of the Democrats. And Mansfield, of course, had been a friend and colleague of President Johnson. And there was really almost a perfect collaboration among President Johnson, Senator Mansfield, and Senator Dirksen to get these pieces of legislation passed.
Wow, fantastic, that's great. Do you remember your first day, your first day on the scene, what it was like?
The first thing...
First day working, I'm sorry.
Yeah. My first day as a page started getting sworn in at the bursar's office in the Senate, and then the pages all went to the floor of the Senate, and we observed the new senators being sworn in. And one of those new senators was Senator Robert Kennedy. And then we pretty quickly got to work. We had to carry messages back and forth between offices and the Senate chambers. This was all before the digital revolution, so things literally had to be carried from office to office. I do remember that we were handed a photo book of 100 senators, and the assignment was memorize these photographs and the names, because we should recognize all the senators. Well, that's a big job right away, and some of the photographs were really pretty old. I mean, the senators had aged since the photos were taken. So a fellow page gave me some advice: just call everybody senator. And I used that for a while till I recognized all the senators.
That's some good advice. That's great advice. Senator or sir or both.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. You touched on, you did tell us where you lived and sort of what your schedule was. Anything else about the daily life of a page, and what happened on weekends? I mean, did you have to, when was your, it sounds like you had an incredibly long working day, but tell us a little bit more about the sort of working and living conditions and your schedule.
I lived in a rooming house, so I came and went on my own, and I had to get food at either at a grocery store or more likely at a small coffee shop up on Pennsylvania Avenue on Capitol Hill. In the mornings, we would go to Capitol Page School up on the top floor of the Library of Congress, and often that was without breakfast. Just get up and go to school. We took a break, after the first class period, and we'd go to the Library of Congress snack bar, and that was breakfast. My memory is that classes were out by 10 or 10:30. We'd cross the street to the Capitol building, and the hour, say from 11 to 12, was busy because Senate offices and the floor of the Senate were getting ready for the day's session. Senate usually went into session around 12 noon, and some pages would sit on the rostrum down in front, and if a senator wanted a page, snap the fingers, and page would do the errand for the senator. The cloakroom, which was run by staffers, paid staffers, would then assign pages to go back and forth to offices or down to the radio TV gallery or wherever errands had to be done. The day usually ended around 5 or 6 whenever the Senate went out of session, but sometimes it went late, and occasionally the Senate stayed in session through the weekend. If I had a weekend day free, I would catch up on homework. I was trying to be a good student. And occasionally I would play some music. I'm an amateur musician all my life, and I did have my viola and violin, and I would try to play some music, and I even, for a while, played in one of the local youth orchestras on the weekends, but I kept missing weekday rehearsals. I stayed busy. I don't have any memories of bad experiences. For example, I don't have memories of drinking parties or other activities that got some of the pages into trouble later on. I just don't remember that happening. Maybe I was just excluded from those parties. I did have some friends among the pages. I was a classmate of Tom Davis, who went on to become a U.S. representative. And some of the friends and I would talk a little after work, but usually we were just busy and tired, and so there wasn't a lot of socializing with other pages. I do have one memory once of a few of us walking all the way from Capitol Hill down to the Washington Monument and just talking as we walked and turned around and walked back about how important it was that we teenagers were actually participating in this government. And I think that's really the heart of this experience. Thousands of teenage Americans have had a chance to be part of government, It's not just observing it, but in a small way being part of it. And what a wonderful experience. I realize I'm lucky to have been one of those people, and I do think that if more could have that experience, it would be very positive.
Great, it's a great statement. Errands, do you recall any really unusual, I mean, this may be a silly question, but I'll ask it anyway. The most unusual errand you had to run for a senator?
Pages were often carrying things back and forth between the senator's office and the floor of the Senate. Sometimes those things were gifts, mementos, plaques, odd-looking works of art. Sometimes we would carry videotapes back and forth between the radio TV gallery. It was all transported by hand. This was in the analog age, no digital transmission. And so pages had to know the corridors of the Capitol and also use the train to get back and forth between the Capitol and some of the office buildings. Often, especially in the tourist season, it was faster to get off the train and just run through the sidewalk alongside the train. We could beat the train. I'm aware that there were some hideaway offices in the Capitol, and every now and then a senator would ask for some food to be brought to that hideaway office. At the time, I knew where those offices were. As an adult, I've gone back to the Capitol a few times, can't find them. I haven't been able to find my way to any of those old offices.
I think we've touched on social life. Favorite work assignments, least favorite work assignments as a page? Favorites, the ones you didn't care for too much? Your favorite thing to do?
I actually appreciated being on the floor listening to the debates. I was sort of nerdy about it. I wanted to know what the senators were talking about. And I enjoyed sitting on the rostrum listening. I was always getting interrupted by a senator who snapped his fingers and called me to do an errand. So I didn't have a chance to really take it all in for long periods of time. But I knew when legislation was being discussed, and I knew what it was, and I just found it fascinating. It really sparked for me a lifelong interest in good government. And I think being a page led me to be a federal employee. When I finished college, I came to DC, and I've lived here in DC ever since I came back after college. And I worked for the federal government for 34 years. I was in the public information area. I helped talk about health and safety issues. And I still believe that good government is what we should be doing and what we need. And I learned a lot about that from my time as a page.
Great. You sort of went this, but in terms of social life, the social life, well, it sounds like you were pretty focused the entire time. There wasn't a whole lot of social life with the other pages. But any impressions of the other kids that you mentioned some names, but any impressions about the diversity of the pages? Or
my impression of my colleagues in the Page School was that we were fairly representative of America. We weren't wealthy people, and we weren't from famous families. We were mostly white, and we were all male. There were a few African Americans by 1965, no girls yet. They came later. I recognized that it wasn't very diverse, but I also recognized that our society was changing. I mean, that's what the voting rights law was about. And I was pretty confident things would change, and they did. I think all of my colleagues were friendly and fairly serious. When we had class at the Capitol Page School, just about everybody did their work and tried to participate. I don't have an impression that there were a lot of problems at the Capitol Page School. I know that over the years there's been some notorious moments of problems, but you do find that in just about any school in the country. So in general, I think the Pages took it seriously and recognized it as a very important experience.
Great. Access, it sounds like it sounds to me like you had pretty, unlike today with the security issues. Can you talk about your access to the places in and around the Capitol?
The Pages made friends with the guards. The guards knew us, we knew the guards. And we were friendly and trusted, and as long as we did our job, and we were usually headed to a very specific place, some senator's office or some specific office in the Capitol, like the Radio TV Gallery. And as long as we did our job, the guards allowed us to move, even if the public was being routed in a different direction. And it was just all based on trust between the guards and the Pages.
Wow. What a different time that was. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, have I missed anything about the actual experience of being a Page? Are there any other stories or anything that come to mind that we haven't covered?
Well, I'm just going to mention the artifacts I brought, just so you have it explained.
Please do.
I brought the vote sheet for the Voting Rights Act that I filled out the day the Senate passed the Voting Rights Act. And that's interesting, and I show that to my kids at the school. I also brought a Life magazine article about Senator Dirksen because he wrote to Ken Giles with